Hey everyone, my name is Veronica Reynolds, and I'm a UCLA law student. I'm also one of the co-founders of Blockchain at UCLA. We're an organization at UCLA that puts together educational curriculum to teach students and the community members about blockchain, everyone from beginners to experts. And we also do research, feasibility studies, and consulting, and we're getting a lot of that off the ground. So if you have any projects, please come talk to me. There are other Blockchain at UCLA students, founders and leadership members who are in the audience, so if you see them, please feel free to talk to them. I'm also co-founder of Women in Blockchain and Ladies of Ledger. This is a Women in Blockchain panel. There's been some articles about women in blockchain panels. I encourage you to go check it out. I think it's a complex issue. We're not gonna actually go into those issues on the panel, but I will say I think it's important to build community. If you're a woman and you're looking for a community, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. There's a link on our page. We're doing an event in June. It's welcoming to people who are experts as well as people who are new to this space. So please find me on LinkedIn, check that out. And with that, I'm really excited to introduce the brilliant women we have on stage. Why don't you guys come on up, and I'm gonna let them kind of introduce themselves and talk about their work in the space before we get started. Okay, so let's just take a minute or two to talk about our experience, background, and why we're here, what our background in blockchain is. Sara, Clayton, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, so hi everybody, my name's Sara Clayton. I come from the domain name industry originally. I worked in London for a number of years for a corporate domain name management company. We also did some consulting around the new GTRD program, and it was through that that I discovered Namecoin. I was working in marketing at the time. And I thought, Namecoin, this is an incredible technology. What's this blockchain thing about? Wasn't familiar with Bitcoin at all. So through Namecoin, I found Bitcoin, started going to these Bitcoin meetups all around London. There was hardly any of us there, like 6 of us in a pub or something. I was the only girl. And it was great. We were talking about all these crazy coins that we could create, like really dumb ideas, But then I got into the technology a bit more, and I did the University of Nicosia Introduction to Cryptocurrencies course, which is free. I highly recommend it. And from there, I was looking for a new opportunity, and it was either find a new job or go back to school. So I applied to do a PhD program at USC, and I got in. And all my research revolves around blockchain, and I primarily look at the politics of decision-making in the blockchain ecosystem, so whether that's like the Bitcoin scalability debate or how kind of people perceive trust in the ecosystem as a whole. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
And you're getting your PhD in blockchain at USC, is that right?
Yeah, well, the field's communication,
okay.
Which is great, because that means I get to bridge, business school with the engineering school, with comm, and I get to explore all these cool ideas that I wouldn't really be able to do if I was kind of boxed in somewhere, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and then we have Jenny Q.
I gotta borrow a mic. Well, hey everybody. Isn't this a great group of women? Thank you. A little bit about myself. My name is Jenny Q. Ta. I am a serial entrepreneur. I've exited twice. I am probably the only minority female who founded 2 broker-dealers, which is a small Goldman Sachs, manage over almost $1/3 billion, self-made millionaire in my 20s. And how I got into Bitcoin was I've been following it for a while, but I didn't make the first trigger until the end of 2016. So those who do follow Bitcoin, well, I'm sure that's why you're here, for the last 9 to 10 years that Bitcoin has been in existence, up through 2016, Bitcoin did not surpass $1,000. So as a Wall Street gal, as you know, most of us, when we forecast a certain stock, when we would tell our clients that, buy this stock or buy that stock, you may get a 15, 20, maximum 30% return within the next 12 to 18 months. That is a pretty aggressive call. But if you follow my Twitter, this tweet is still on my Twitter, which is Jenny Q Ta, and then you add number 9 at the end, because I got taken hostage with my true name. The tweet is still on there, December of 2016. I tweeted that I predicted that Bitcoin would double in 2017. Now obviously, Bitcoin flew to the moon. 19,000, was it? Certainly my call was conservative, looking back, but on the Wall Street side, that was a pretty awesome call because it was a double. I will leave it as that, and I'll pass it on to our next panelist here, and we look forward to giving you guys a great panel today. Thank you.
My name is Sara Borazan, and I am a principal and director of business development with North Capital. A little bit about North Capital is we are a registered custodial broker-dealer and technology provider, really enabling private markets. And so we provide a comprehensive solution for token offerings, really everything from the moment that an ICO is ready to launch, or not just limited to an ICO, but any private offering is ready to launch to the moment that you're ready to close or issue the tokens. We provide that compliance infrastructure and framework, everything in between. So as you're bringing on investors, as I've heard in previous panels and in discussions today, there's the question of which offering exemption to use, Reg D, Reg S, Reg A+. We're experienced and provide automated technology for your investors for any of those exemptions. So know your customer, OFAC, AML checks, accreditation verification, moving the money, providing escrow for the funds. So we really offer everything as a comprehensive solution, but also a la carte as well. North Capital as a firm, we've been in the industry for a long time now. We're similar to Jenny here, we're old finance guys, so our team's been in the industry for a long time. Our broker-dealer was founded in 2011. We jumped into the space with the Jobs Act. So in our experience, we've done over 600 deals, over 50,000 individual transactions, and raised over $500 million. So we're really experienced with the ins and outs of a private offering. And now as it kind of extends into the blockchain space and we're able to scale and enable this space, we've really been at the forefront of that.
So next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tuwana Evans. I'm the founder of GuapCoin. Essentially, GuapCoin is a project that I started to work towards leveraging the spending power of the Black community, because in the Black community we spend $1.2 trillion, and that's spending power, but we don't have retention power. So I created GuapCoin as a project that will work alongside a data platform that will benchmark our spending power and also leverage it and be able to leverage it for our community.
That's great, and she was, Tavonia was also featured in a recent article from Glamour magazine that kind of went viral in our community. I think it was called Blockchain's Not Just for Bros Anymore, so you should check that out. Featured alongside some other amazing women. So, and then finally we have Ko.
Hi, I'm Ko Kim. I've probably only been in this space literally for about a year, but my expertise has always been in gaming. So I've actually built Google Play's, or helped build Google Play's business globally to $10 billion, specifically in international markets. Built all of Asia, most of Asia, or helped build a lot of Asia anyway. And then moved into streaming. And so the way I evaluate a lot of these ICOs as not only an investor and advisor is that I think of them all as virtual economies. And so that's kind of how I vet a lot of these companies. And especially the ones that I decide to work with. Currently advise Refurium. That was an influencer marketing blockchain company that had about 800 million in commits, but only could take obviously 5% of that. But and then also advise in a couple of other more infrastructure related kind of ICOs and like mostly blockchain companies as well. I also run a beauty e-commerce startup as well, so kind of doing those at once. So I specifically focus on consumer and then how blockchain can apply in those areas.
So I have I want to hear if you guys have projects that have come along your path over the past couple months, anything kind of up and coming that you're excited about that you're seeing.
Do you have,
Yeah, whoever wants to start.
Do you want to start? Or?
Sarah,
I
Clayton,
definitely
do you
have
wanna-
projects that I'm looking at, but it's...
Projects, well, I've been working quite recently with a developer who's in the audience here somewhere on a blockchain music platform because I really feel that blockchain is really there to empower the little man. It's about community participation. It's about removing these inefficiencies in the ecosystem that are really not benefiting anybody apart from those middlemen that are there making, quite frankly, a lot of money. So what we really envisage for the music industry is like an intellectual property docketing platform that really puts into the hands of the musicians, total power and control over their intellectual work. So they can also, beyond that, if they throw all that information into a smart contract, not just the music, but where that was played, did a DJ halfway around the world play their song, and they can get that information and maybe contact them and say, oh, thanks for that, and so you're really building these bridges that kind of weren't there before, and empowering not only the little man, but it's like end to end without all this middle layer bureaucracy that, quite frankly, isn't necessary with this technology now. So I'd say that would be.
That's great. Do you have anything, Jenny or Sarah, that...
Were you saying that you were working on a project already dealing with music, or are you saying that that's just a good example?
I've been working with a developer on this
okay.
project, yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is from a friend of mine. I'm not sure if she's here, but she is in research at USC about cancer. And she recently brought this up to me, and I find it quite interesting. So if any of you guys are interested, please see me, and I would connect you with her. What they're doing right now is they do research in terms of cancer patient. And I'll give you a quick example of what she shared with me, and that she's looking to do this on a blockchain technology. So for example, we have patient A who has cancer, say at the age of 30, 31. She wanted to find out around the world if there's any other cancer patient her age, what type of medication they're taking, what type of chemotherapy they're taking, and the longevity of that cancer patients in terms of living or dying. So because she's in research, she wanted to know, and she was telling me that there's not a lot of data out there, only because, as you know, each of us, if we have any medical records, it's very private these days. Even the hospital would not release it. So with the blockchain technology, it's up to each one of us. It's sort of like our driver's license, I believe, that you wanted to donate your organs and you have this little red button on your sticker on your driver's license. I believe that that is a really cool idea. I believe that they've had some recent funding. So the project is going pretty well. That is not my field. I'm very horrible in terms of the medical sector. But even when she explained this to me as we're working on it, I find it extremely fascinating. So blockchain can take literally anything to the next level when it comes to, again, cancer, any of these type of data where people can just share and save, other people, because data is what we're looking for these days. So that's just something that I've recently heard.
I think since I look a lot at gaming-related ecosystems and infrastructure, I mean, even I like making a lot of comparisons from like the way that like mobile gaming has developed as an industry versus how blockchain is developing in an industry, because it's actually very similar. Back when a game developer had to develop, let's say, for a game on a mobile, they actually didn't have tools that are like Unity. They didn't have distribution platforms like Google or Apple. And so back then, what they had to do is they had to work with not only carriers, they they had to work with not only carriers, but they had to build, first when they're building products, they had to build for like each one of these devices, right? So you imagine back in like the Java days, they had to build on Java and then do QA on, let's say, thousands of different devices. And not only that, the deals they have to make for distribution was not only on the carrier side, so like in the US, there's like 3 or 4 carriers in the loan, but on top of that, they had to do that internationally, and then on top of that, they had to deal with all the payment processors, right, in order to take their payment. So if you think about like how, and then eventually what happened was someone figured out a way for game developers to develop and distribute on multiple platforms. A bunch of players came out that solved the distribution and even the payments problem, and then like advertising and so on and so forth. And so it's actually interesting how like that from a distribution and marketing level, gaming has developed, and I'm seeing this right now with blockchain specifically. There's a lot of platforms out there. There's a lot of infrastructure problems out there, but if I was a decentralized app developer where I had to choose between, I don't know, who knows how many platforms are out there to build on, and also like how many different regions you have to go to and the types of forms of payments you have to take, it's probably a big headache. And so like a lot of the things that I look at is like, does it solve a very specific problem that where being decentralized is a good thing? I actually say there's a lot of applications out there where having a centralized solution is infinitely better, or that's not going to make, or having a decentralized solution won't make that big of a difference. And then on top of that is that I look at a lot of stuff of like how are things being developed. I look at a lot of things around identity, especially in the gaming space. Anonymous identity in terms of like reputation, cyberbullying, a lot of that stuff is actually very interesting to me. So things about fraud, gambling is actually a very good use case, and skill gaming based in gaming itself, because that has a lot of issues with like escrow, identity management. How do you do exchanges between like 2 people that are making wagering bets? Also like regulatory stuff is like a headache for that. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things that I look for, is like what are the specific pain points that blockchain can solve when it deals with trust and identity. And then as gaming, because in my mind, all blockchain companies are kind of like gaming companies one end, is like, can they build a virtual economy that's sustainable? Are they able to go to market? Can they grow? Do users have a reason to come back? And that's kind of like generally a lot of the things I look for. And so like Immunium and Referium, there's a few gambling companies that are very interesting on my belt, some infrastructure related stuff that helps what I call the fragmentation problem on developing applications on the blockchain. So that's kind of the realm. And unfortunately, a lot of these companies I'm working with now are kind of in stealth, so I can't really say who I'm involved with right now. But that's kind of like my thesis going into a lot of these projects.
I wanted to add on what she was saying, basically with the music platform, just intellectual property in general, because actually that's a major part of what we're working on with WAPOint is a music platform and intellectual property. So that's a huge thing. Being able to build legacies and really gain value in your community, in our community, off of the legacies that we're building, because that is a big soft spot in the Black community. We've contributed a lot to the music and the music of this country and of the world, but we don't typically have a lot to kind of show for it per se in regards to legacies and that type of thing. So we're really getting into that part, building legacies, and even in patents and even in intellectual properties that you own, or whether it's art or whatever. That's a very, very, very huge use case of blockchain.
The creative industries as a whole, for sure. Like, especially in terms of like remix and sampling, and you can attribute, okay, yes, I stole a section of your song.
Yeah, and
but I'm going to pay you for it. But I'm also created my new thing now.
I think there's a lot of interesting applications of how digital currencies like crypto, blockchain in itself can actually make somewhat inaccessible or illiquid assets more liquid. One example that I like looking at, just because I'm personally involved in, is real estate. So a lot of commercial real estate, for example, even like personal, like a lot of real estate. We're coming into an era where most like millennials, especially of our generation, are least likely to be homeowners right now, because the amount that, like let's say for San Francisco, right? You have to, if you're making under $150,000 as an income, you are technically not even, you're technically poor apparently. So it's like, and like a lot of those people are from the Bay Area, and especially in San Francisco, like heaven forbid that you're trying to buy a condo or a home right now. To buy a 1-bedroom condo, it's literally going for $1,000 per square foot. So for a lot of these people where wealth especially is still, a lot of wealth building is actually still tied to these assets, especially like real estate, I've seen the gap widening in terms of wealth right now. What's really interesting is, to me, especially with these cryptocurrencies, and especially it's allowing a way for any individual with it like kind of lowers the bar to enter in some of these asset classes that are becoming a lot more inaccessible. And to me, like, what's really exciting about blockchain as a technology is that it's actually creating accessibility to wealth, which I think is like a very interesting concept globally. And so, I mean, I don't know, vastly, I think all real estate's undervalued. Can you imagine if people can just literally invest as little as $10 to have a share of a real estate building, then the amount of money that you can have and you can expand, the addressable market is huge in that extent. So I actually think all real estate right now is like undervalued once you like feel to that, but.
I think that's a super interesting point. I have a quick question for the audience. I have 2 questions. I want you to raise your hand if you got into cryptocurrency because you thought it could change the world. And I want you to raise your hand if you kind of got into cryptocurrency because, wow, you can make a lot of money. Well, totally fine either way. Okay, it's about half and half, which is actually really interesting. And I think both points are really poignant because I think that we're seeing the regulatory landscape change. And so I think this idea that little people can kind of get in and invest in these companies and in this space is starting to look a little questionable. It may not be. I think there's a lot to be revealed. I don't know, Sara, this might be a good topic for you. How does a regulatory field affect exactly what Co was talking about, someone investing $10, which, you know, when we got into Ethereum, it was totally possible. Anybody could do it. Now you have to be an accredited investor if you want to get involved in the space early.
Yeah, that I think for us as a firm and kind of as we're thinking about what tokenizing asset classes or securities, it completes the life cycle of a private security to that of a public equity. So, and what that does is it makes it more accessible. It makes it more accessible to invest $10, $100, but also the cost to do a transaction, a private transaction, just for the person who's trying to sell the interest in real estate is really high. I mean, there's a lot that you have to do from a regulatory aspect. There's the accredited investor aspect, but there's OFAC, AML, the documents being signed. So there's all these items, and by tokenizing and creating a more efficient and scalable technology to be able to streamline this, not only does that bring the costs down to do the transaction, but then it opens the door to other investors. In regards to the exemption types and kind of the restrictions around income, there is Reg A+, so that's an exemption that's available today that can be utilized, that opens the door to non-accredited investors. But then there's also the idea of a secondary market. So there's also the idea of, yes, these securities have a holding period, so there's a 12-month holding period, but after that, if there's an ATM, there's all the regulatory pieces that you have to go through, but once they're established, a non-accredited investor can come and invest a fraction of, get a token or invest 100 or 200, and then they're able to create a diversified portfolio. So, I think it creates opportunity to diversify maybe a small portion of someone's portfolio, but the broker-dealer background in me makes me feel like I need to say, proceed with caution, and it's not for everyone, and you should make sure that you have the right risk tolerance, but I think that piece of it, what you were saying, that's what makes us excited.
Well, and another point that I do want to bring out is it's not just the US. I actually see a lot more opportunity outside the US than personally a lot of the projects in the United States because of this accessibility point, right? Like there are a lot of smart teams. I mean, we're very blessed in certain parts of Bay Area and all this. I'm very privileged to be able to have access to capital. There are tons of SMBs and enterprises and business owners that do not have the access to, let's say, even capital, period, but also efficient and pretty cheap capital, right? I mean, if you look at interest rates, let's say in East Africa, when some of those enterprises, I have a friend that she works with small enterprises there, their interest rates are anywhere from 20 to 30%. So, and to get a small business loan here, it's 7%, right? And so imagine that not only, but that's just because of what they have access to within that region. And what's really interesting for me here is that as an investor or someone saying is I'm not just tied to the US market alone. I have an ability to make an impact on someone's life even outside the US, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in some parts of Central America and Latin America. I'm able to invest and at least make an impact on someone's life not even like in a lot of these tech companies too. And so that's what I'm more excited about, is just to see like this new generation of companies arising just because they have access to capital from from all over the world.
Yeah. So we're getting close on time, so I think I'm just gonna follow up or wrap up with one last question. There's a lot of discussion about which coins are gonna survive, which coin will rule them all. So do you guys have thoughts? Is Bitcoin, where it's progressing, have a future? I want to start with you, Sara, because I think this relates to a lot of your research. And then maybe we have time to kind of discuss that a little bit before we wrap up.
Yeah, so I mean, everything has a future, but it's what that future is going to look like. So I'd say with Bitcoin's an interesting one, especially with regards to the split that happened last year with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, which occurred because the folks on the Bitcoin Cash side, quite frankly, didn't agree with what the community was doing on the Bitcoin side, essentially Blockstream, if you're familiar with them. And they hired a lot of the core development team, and some people would argue that it was in their interest to keep the block size small, which meant transaction fees went up and the mempool was getting clogged, which meant it was a long time for a transaction to confirm when there was a lot of people using the network. In doing so, that allows them to potentially profit off second layer solutions. So a lot of the community didn't like that, and they forked the chain, and now we have Bitcoin Cash, and that has an 8 meg block size. But one interesting thing that Blockstream is, Blockstream really promotes is the Lightning Network, which is super interesting, because what you can do with the Lightning Network is it kind of works on 6 degrees of separation logic. So you open up channels with different people to transact with them. So while you might not have a direct channel open with the nearest person in your network, they might have a channel open with the person you actually want to transact with. So what this second layer kind of does is it allows you kind of settle off chain, and then there's a time lock on it, and then after a certain amount of time, then whatever the final balance in everybody's wallet, that's what gets broadcast to the chain. But what this allows is real-time payments, like streaming money. So that's super interesting, because you can be getting paid in real time. You go to your job and you're paid minute by minute, for everything that you're doing, second by second. So what does that mean in terms of, how we manage our money? Then, but beyond that, if you've got this settlement layer, which is quite, it's expensive to settle now, but that can kind of take place of real-time gross settlement in terms of how the central banks settle among themselves right now. So you've got everything from, the big ticket items down to the buying a cup of coffee items, which is super interesting. So I don't know how it's all going to play out. I mean, Bitcoin may or may not be the answer, but it's certainly exciting to think about.
I think we're probably wrapping down to the last 60 seconds, and hopefully I'll close it with this way. Coming from a Wall Street gal, conservative, but I would bet the farm on Bitcoin. Okay, so here's my little comparison, right? Those of you who do remember the .com era, tons of bad .coms, but there is one little .com that made the founder and CEO became the richest man in the world today, Jeff Bezos, which is Amazon. So in the basket of over 3,000 coins we have today, I'm cautiously comparing Bitcoin to that of Amazon. Now we will ask you guys a question earlier where many of you guys raise your hands that you're into coins because of wealth, right? I was a self-made millionaire on Wall Street when I was in my 20s. And so therefore, I believe that Bitcoin is the coin that I would bet the farm, on, but only if it falls down to $5,000. So that's also another tweet that I tweeted out. Again, it's all about buying perfectly at the right time, never chase it. As you've been following Bitcoin for the last couple of weeks, it seems to have a very strong resistance at $10,000, okay? So any economic news out there, it could drop to 5,000. If it did drop from 19,000 to 6,000 in February, why couldn't it drop from the current 9,000 something to 5? So that is my target, and if you guys do see 5,000 Bitcoin, I hope you remember Jenny Q Ta, because somewhere on this planet she's loading up. So that's all I wanted to wrap it up with.
That's great. Thank you, Jenny. And thank you, everyone. I think we have to wrap it up. I'm getting the signal. I want to thank everyone for coming. It's been great to be here, and thank you for the organizers for having us.
Thank you.